That's pretty cool walk-on music. How you doing, Eric?
Good, how are you?
All right. This is a great crowd. Great to see everybody. How about that lunch? It was really good, wasn't it? Yeah. Cyber Scoop, great job, Goldie, as always. Well, Eric, hey, it's great to see you. Thanks a lot for joining us to talk about something that, isn't typically a topic of conversation at conferences like this, is secure connection to the internet and what's the role of the government in that. Specifically, GSA. Can you tell us a little bit about your role, what you do at GSA, and what GSA's role is in securing government connections?
Sure. So GSA as an agency is just an immense ocean of different programs and different offices. And so we interact with secure connections in a bunch of different ways. My organization in particular, the Technology Transformation Services, we operate shared services that help agencies when they use our shared services to host applications or websites. We help them get that done automatically. From a more practical and sort of policy implementation stance, we work with OMB, we work with DHS, we work with different agencies to help implement policy around using secure connections. We help figure out what's reasonable to really require people to do, and we help them actually implement that and get that done, make it really clear to them, provide resources and that sort of thing.
So what are you seeing as far as adoption of those policies and utilization across the government networks?
Yeah, so in 2015, the Office of Management and Budget just sort of required HTTPS and something called strict transport security across the board. And what those do is just basically ensure that a secure connection will be made over the public internet when you communicate with a government service on the web. And it ensures that happens even if Wi-Fi or routers are compromised, and ensures that happens even if some random box on the internet that your traffic passes through is hostile. And so adoption in the federal government used secure connections before that mandate came down in 2015, but it was a minority of traffic, right? It was not done consistently, and there was basically no use of strict transport security. And so people were vulnerable to downgrade attacks and that sort of thing. There has been immense improvement, and we've done pretty extensive analysis of that. We've shown that traffic in the government has gone across the board from minority to majority encrypted. We found that deployment of it actually, for once, outpaces the private sector in terms of adoption.
Well, that's great. Typically we tend to think that the private sector outpaces the government in most technologies, but that's not always true, particularly when you talk about security. How do you see the adoption or sharing of information between agencies as you create and distribute new policy or techniques for secure connections?
Yeah, so I think this has been a really interesting collaboration across agencies, right? So we at GSA have worked very closely with the Department of Homeland Security, we both sort of scan and analyze agency services. We measure how their secure connections are doing, and the way that we do that is a little on the unusual side in the federal government in that we actually author software ourselves. We've created open source software that we share across our agencies. And so we can use to do consistent scanning, we can fix each other's bugs, and we're able to meaningfully fill a gap in the open source ecosystem. And some of the tools that we created to analyze the federal government have actually ended up being used in the outside by Google and other places to improve global HTTPS deployment. So sharing that software and those tools has, I think, been a very important way to bring agencies together. And we've had contributions from NASA and the Department of Energy and other places.
So do you partner with DoD as well?
We actually do work with DoD. They operate in a different environment with a different kind of overlay of policies. But yeah, we talk with them quite a bit, and they've been taking some of the tools that we've developed and looking at how to apply those to the DoD space.
DoD does have a different perspective on that type of connection. What about state and local? Do you share that information across the local levels of government to help secure their information?
So we do. The .gov domain generally is mostly state and local domains by the numbers, right? It's over 70% state and local domains, and so we do interact with folks that way. The Department of Homeland Security, in particular, interacts with folks that way. There's actually a piece in State Tech earlier this week by Cameron Dixon from DHS, specifically about state and local governments employing secure connections to meet some of their responsibilities. And we've also we've worked with outside partners to see where people are actually getting certificate warnings and things like that in browsers, and then we've reached out to federal, state, and local places to help them get that fixed.
That's great. So, we talked a little bit about who's doing better or who's first in creating different technologies, but I'm sure you partner a lot with private entities and commercial vendors, enable sharing information and enabling security across the public-private partnership. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, one of the things that makes HTTPS as a protocol so worth investing in is that it is actually, the progress that it makes is very fast, and it is reasonable to deploy updates and work with a relatively small browser community. Right? It's competitive, but it is also, essentially a single-digit number of large platforms. And so one of the ways that we partnered is GSA's .gov program, that top-level domain, has actually started doing what's called preloading of new .gov domains. So every month we take newly registered domains by executive branch agencies, and we send them directly to the Chrome and Firefox teams, and they take that, and those domains get baked into Chrome and Firefox and Apple products and Microsoft products, and just technically enforces secure connections for new domains. So that's something that we're the first existing top-level domain on the whole internet to do, and that's been a successful partnership for us.
That's really exciting as we look forward because as we just heard, threats are continually changing. Our ability to respond to those and understand them is critical, and that the public-private partnership is really important as we go forward. So we've kind of talked about what you do and have done at GSA and across the government. I'm going to ask you now to look into your crystal ball and where do you see this going in the future? What are some of the threats that we might encounter, and what is GSA doing to look into how we avoid those?
Well, if I look into the crystal ball, attacks and where agencies should be focusing, right, is reducing trust on the networks that they have and automating more stuff. And sometimes this can be very challenging for enterprises generally, certainly not just the government. But relying on things like secure connections and putting things like visibility and protections at the endpoints that you have that are crossing across any network. Not relying on VPNs, not relying on particular Wi-Fi or particular networks. Those sorts of things are, I think, where people have to go. And and GSA, supports those sort of things with shared services that help people do that, whether it's hosting services, whether it's support and implementing different things. Or whether it's helping people get their way into the cloud or authorize different things through FedRAMP. Those are the sorts of things that we help people do.
That's really good. And when I think about the Internet of Things and kind of where everything is connected at some point, everything has a IP address. Do you see that impacting our ability to have secure connections going forward? Is that something that's on your radar screen?
I think it will only necessitate a greater use of secure connections. I mean, one of the reasons that to really push on secure connections is because really the only things that you can control are the things that you own, right? Either whether it's your endpoints at the server side in the cloud, or whether it's your endpoints at your fleet level that you're deploying. That's really all you can firmly control, right, when it comes to communication. And so even as things grow and spread and there's an IP address for every single thing that's out there, if we are virtualizing our protections, right, we're not relying on physical perimeters, but we're relying on consistent deployment of logical rules, no matter where things are hosted and what networks they cross, I think we'll be in good shape to handle. I mean, that's not to say it's an easy thing. We're a long way from that as the status quo. But if as we go in that direction, secure connections will only get more important.
Well, Eric, you're really a thought leader in this area, and GSA is doing fantastic things. But I've got to throw a bonus question at you.
Sure.
Because I'm sure, while it's not specific to HTTPS, folks are probably interested in FedRAMP modernization and how industry partners can take advantage of the certification processes and have access to government agencies through that. Do you have any updates or anything you'd like to share with our audience related to that?
Sure. One of the things, so FedRAMP is also part of our organization, and one of the things that we've done with FedRAMP that I think we're pretty happy about is the new tailored baseline. And so the goal of that tailored baseline is to make it approachable and reasonable for, on the sort of lower impact side, software as a service platforms and applications. Want to make it reasonable for them to be authorized for federal use in a consistent government-wide way. You have things like collaboration tools, chat tools, project management software. Those things all exist in different pockets in different agencies, but just because they happen to be operated by people out there, it can be difficult in many places to really authorize those for use in a way that everybody feels comfortable with. So tailored is intended to be a somewhat of a lighter weight and approachable way for small companies and small products to get into the federal marketplace.
There might be a concern that it's a lowering of the bar to entry into FedRAMP. Is that a valid concern?
So I would say no, because what this is for authorizing things of lower risk to the government, right? This is not about bringing in critical infrastructure and things which, if they go down or have a compromise, would show up on the front page of whatever. Right? This is for things that help the agency work more effectively, and I think that it's actually really critical for our critical infrastructure and for our high impact, high security systems that we not spend as a government inordinate and sometimes extreme amounts of resources on the authorization of lower impact stuff. Like if we saturate our IT teams, our digital teams, our legal teams with reviews of 1 million different low impact tools, then nobody will have the bandwidth to be thinking critically and making reasoned decisions about the high security tools.
That's a great point. You've been a great guest today, a really interesting topic, and I thank you for your time and our audience. I hope you got something from that. Thank you very much, Eric.
Thanks very much.